Hello. Should we try it? Maybe not.
Hello.
I shouldn't shock you. I shouldn't surprise you with it. How are you doing?
I'm great.
Hello, everyone. Well, hello, commenters. Hello, everyone watching. Welcome to the mess we're in. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. We are going to, we've got a lot to talk about, really. I'm just back from Wales, where I had a lovely time with your people, Helen. Yeah, it was really good. Let's not talk about that though, unless it's tangential, because there's a couple of things that happened there that are interesting that don't really have anything to do with the protest. Let's move on to something else. We'll be talking to some of the wonderful women from the Welsh group. What's it called again, Helen? You know.
Merched Cymru.
Thank you. I will always
Wales's daughters is what it translates to.
Lovely. But we will be speaking to them later on in the show. For the moment, let's have a catch up. How have you been? What have you been looking at this week? What's been taking your eye? Helen, you go.
Well, me, I think it was mainly that extraordinary, and I'm afraid this might be a bit upsetting for you, but that extraordinary article, the Substack article by Laurie Penny.
Oh yeah.
I mean, really extraordinary. Basically, arguing for no freedom of speech. I mean, it was just incredible. Really excusing it, but and it was interesting because I read the whole thing, and it was very much sort of targeted at you, Graham, saying he's violent, he should not be allowed on Substack, but with very little justification. And this was obvious because the article itself then didn't really talk about you. It just went on about this sort of fictional blowhard at a party and the KKK. So I responded to her tweet that she tweeted out and said, this doesn't really make a very decent case for, the bar for throwing somebody off a platform, the bar for silencing somebody should be extremely high. You should be able to make a very, very decent case for it. Yeah. And I said that I didn't think that this case was very good. And the response, I thought the response was really quite extraordinary. Because she said, well, I don't need to make the case. Grace Lavery's already done that. And I said, but that case...
The porn fetishist?
The porn fetishist who abuses his wife?
But that case wasn't very good either, because it revolved a lot around Twitter, which is not Substack. And actually, if you read what Graham put on Substack, it was very much, I want to clarify that I do not believe so-and-so is like a paedophile. Absolutely not. That's not what I was saying. And so if you're going to make a case about Substack, then it's got to be stronger than a clarification on something that was said on Twitter.
Yeah.
But it still carried on. And instead of then responding, the response was, are you supporting him? It's not a good look. And I said, it's not about supporting or not supporting. It's about you having to make a decent case. But anyway, long story short, there was no decent case, and I was then blocked. But before I was blocked, and this was very interesting, she was responding to me, like she was doing that irritating thing where she responds 2 tweets to my one, so the thread gets completely fractured. But there was no way that this person was not conversing with me. But I went and had a bit of dinner, and I come back, and she said, "You're violating my boundaries. You seem to believe that you're entitled to my time. You're violating my boundaries. No means no."
And it was insanity. I love the part where she unblocked you so that she could keep talking at you, and then reblocked you again, and then it's like, why won't you leave me alone? It's like.
Yeah.
But it was then. But I think it was that use of, that use of violating my boundaries, and it's got to be purposeful, isn't it? And I think it's either purposeful, and I think it just minimizes the whole idea of boundary violation, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And I can't help that this is the point of it.
And she finds it, well, I don't think it's, the point of it is not so much to undermine women having their boundaries violated, although I think that's what she's doing, perhaps not deliberately, but that's definitely what she's doing. But the point is simply to protect herself from being scrutinized and protect her ideas from being scrutinized. She did, another person did it, what was her name? The Green Party person who was in a debate with Ali Sharar. Or Sharar Ali, I can't remember. Sorry. Who is that person again? It begins with M. Someone will know. Anyway, this woman was on with Sharar Ali, I think it is, and she mentioned. Please, I'd love to remember this person's name if anyone could write it in the box. She mentioned. She said she immediately started trying to twist what he was saying, as if he was actually not concentrating on a real issue by talking about trans rights versus women's rights. So she started mentioning rape crisis centers, okay? And beautifully, she just walked into a trap that she had placed herself, which is basically that at the moment, you got a man in charge of Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre who is telling women that they'll be re-educated if they come to her center for his center for support, and you know, Ali pointed out that he had signed a thing saying that women will always have the right, should have the right to a female carer, and he turned it back on her. Someone will say, no, Womack. It was Womack, Amelia Womack. He turned it back on her and said, "You would vote against that, wouldn't you?" And he managed to get those words out, but just before he did, she realized what she'd done. And she kept repeating the same thing, and it was so fascinating. I hope maybe I've talked about this before, but it's really interesting. She kept saying, "As a woman, as a woman, as a woman, as a woman," like that, trying to talk over him and stop him from saying what he was about to say. So she was doing that thing that identity politics fans love to do, which is they use their part of an oppressed group to silence you, even if you're standing up for the oppressed group.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's
totally.
It's the most dishonest thing. And I was so happy to see Starkey in that old video nailing Laurie Penny as an absolute hypocrite by pointing out that there was a debate that he wanted to do for free, and she asked for so much money that they had to cancel the debate. It's an incredible video.
But you know,
it's all self-defense.
But the thing that really gets me about this is that I mean I know we've said this sort of thing before, but we're walking into a sort of situation where people just don't feel the need to be decent, to make a proper decent case, a proper argument, sort of logical case for things. This, you know, if you are like banning somebody from like the virtual public square is a really big deal. And you know, if you are going to argue for it simply on the basis that you don't like what this person is saying, it's how can you not see just a little bit further ahead and see this could happen to everyone at any point?
Anytime.
It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying how totalitarian that this movement is. It's, I mean, it is really frightening.
It's totalitarian because they believe they are on the side of good, and it goes back to that thing I was talking about a couple months ago. I'm calling it like heart washing, where when your heart is convinced that you're on the right side of something and your heart is compassionate about something, it turns your brain off. And I use the example of Scientology. People get into Scientology because they think they're literally improving their lives, and then they think they're literally saving the world. So any disagreement with Scientology is like, I can't possibly allow myself to agree with you because that would mean I agree with destroying the planet. And that's not something I can allow myself to do. Another great example is the rabid fervor that anti-abortion activists whip up within themselves, the frenzied anger that they can whip themselves into, where they literally want to bomb places and kill people. But they believe babies are being murdered. That's an emotional argument. And when you think that you're saving babies' lives, you turn your brain off entirely. And the idea that, you know, that you might listen to the other side, the idea that you would ever even concede a point from the side of let's murder babies, you could never allow yourself to do that. So there's a heart washing. There's an element of like your heart is so passionate about something, you just turn your brain off entirely. And that's what these people are doing. Laurie Penny truly believes that, you know, somehow this LGBT that it's like murdering gays. It's gay bashing or equivalent to that by allowing any point about that's gender critical to exist. You know, they've taken all the sympathy and good intentions towards gays and lesbians, added transsexuals to that, and then turned it into transgender, which is anything, a little bit of nail polish, you know. And they just genuinely believe that people are dying on the streets and they can't possibly concede anything to the other side. They've turned their brains off. There's no critical thinking. And a great example of that is that extraordinary piece that Graham just published about that monster Ulan. Ulan's been around the skeptical atheist movement for years and years and years. Has always been a bit of a weirdo, but is like, I didn't realize the extent to which he's an absolute psychotic, a rabid maniac. He's someone I would see as very equivalent to like an anti-abortion maniac who's just so frenzied himself into this self-righteousness, you know?
I would actually disagree with that. I think Ulan is a different thing. I think Ulan is just a sadist. And I think that he's...
I think you're actually right there. He's got like...
I don't think he
likes
really
to bully.
believes. He's just a bully and a sadist who likes to... who realizes that he's found a way of doing what he would do as a hobby anyway and get pats on the head from people who he'd normally be trying to dox themselves. You know, he'd hate these people. It's just, this is the easiest way he can attack women. And it's very interesting to me that the women he is most interested in attacking are women who are involved with safeguarding. He's had some bots thrown off or some socks thrown off Twitter for
some of his own socks have been thrown off. You mean?
Because he pretended to be Lisa Muggeridge, who is a safeguarding expert and a social worker. So you know, that's another way you can report. If you report him, you can report him for evading a ban on that. But he's a monster, and I think he's slightly different to the usual people. Another person, for instance, who is not in this for any reason other than themselves is Hayden. You know, Hayden's another good example of someone who's just, you know, just a hobby for them. It's fun. You know,
a vexatious litigant and a dangerous person. And a career criminal. You know, somebody who's with 17 convictions or something like that. 17 times going to court or whatever. I won't get into it, but
I don't think it's 17 convictions, but there's a few convictions. But like Laurie Penny was interesting as well with Jane Clare Jones, because she engages people like Jane Clare Jones, who is like smarter than her by a like leagues, and then just suddenly shuts off, you know, because she cannot counter any of the arguments, you know. She's like a kid who wants to play with the grown-ups, but then it, you know, starts crying.
Well, I've had the main thing that I find is like huge disappointment on just this totalitarian. This movement is totalitarian. I mean, it really is. It's authoritative and it's totalitarian, and you know, it's not rational. It's not rational. It's not logical, and that's really frightening. And it's really frightening that it's got such
not
a
be
foothold.
rational about anything else. This starts with this, and then it turns into everything, as it already is in Canada. It started with self-ID, and now we need to literally introduce these draconian censorship on the internet laws that are just so horrifically frightening. You know, it's just once one thing happens where the left gets too self-righteous, East Germany comes along very, very quickly. You know, it's really scary.
Well, I was looking at, I don't know if any, somebody brought this to my attention yesterday. So New Zealand has a bill to ban LGBTQ conversion practices, and they received a record of 100,000 submissions. And this is in part because there was a big social media push for people to submit. And they're very hopeful that it'll be on the side of, you know, banning conversion therapy. And we're going to put conversion therapy in courts, because obviously, you know, you look at conversion therapy and it's actually the opposite, you know, the gay conversion therapy and trans. But there's a note right at the bottom which is really, really frightening. I'm reading the Guardian article, and it said the National Party voted against the bill at its first reading, and they said that they would not stop the legislation unless it included an exemption to stop parents being prosecuted. With strong support from the Labour and Green parties, a second reading would have the numbers to pass without them. So they would prosecute parents for basically not affirming that their kid is trans. And they're talking jail sentences here. They're talking jail sentences.
Oh yeah, but that's already in place in Australia.
Yeah,
that's already in place in Australia. You know,
what jail sentences for parents?
Who are trying to help their kids not mutilate their bodies. You know, it's just unbelievable. And the oldest trans kid in the world is only reaching about 20 years old right now. This is a brand new thing that was just invented a few years ago, that you can tell kids that they're transsexual and raise them as transsexuals, you know?
Yeah.
This is a brand new phenomenon. It's not working out well already. The idea that everybody wants to assume that this is just there's always been a certain percentage of kids who are secretly transsexual and we could detect them from babies. It's like utterly lunatic. It just doesn't make any sense.
I think one of the hardest because they've now co-opted straight people into the LGBT plus, because everything after LGB means straight. Even though I know some transsexuals are same-sex attracted, but everything certainly after T is straight. What it does is it makes it very hard to explain to people why arguing against conversion therapy under the current understanding is actually arguing for conversion therapy.
Yes, definitely.
I would like to get people's opinions. You can write to me or write to my blog, put it in my comments, or however you want to get it to me, on how you can phrase this so that it's not confusing. It's very hard to explain to people, but we really need to get across to the message that if you're arguing against conversion therapy for LGBT plus people, you're actually arguing for conversion therapy for LGB people. Yeah, that is a very complicated idea, and we really need to get it across to people.
I mean, and we know this. This is happening in Iran. Like it literally happens in Iran.
Yeah.
And Pakistan.
Well, you know,
Pakistan has the death penalty for gays, and they celebrate trans. So yeah, you know.
Pig News love Iran. Pig News painted Iran and I think Pakistan as just wonderful places because they trans gay men. You know, it's extraordinary.
It's really hard because there's a lot of some people are sort of coaxed into transitioning by homophobic parents.
You mean straight? Sorry.
Some people are coaxed into transitioning by their parents, but some people kind of internalize homophobia. So often homosexual transsexualism has so much internalized homophobia in it. And you see a lot of people who transition and they're happy in their transition, but they'll still tell you, a big dose of internalized lesbophobia is what I was processing when I transitioned. And I'm happy with my transition now and I'm comfortable, but that's why I did it, because I was facing tons of internalized homophobia and lesbophobia, So that's a hard thing for people to understand, because it goes to the sort of like, when you chose to do it for yourself, you wanted to do it, but that choice was influenced by problems in society and by negative, by you internalizing stuff that was harming you, So that's a hard thing for people to process. When you choose to do something that isn't optimal for you, but it's because of the problems within society that we're supposed to fix society. That's the solution to that,
People's imagination is so limited, it was the same thing when people were talking about the it being women's choice to wear the all over burqa. It's like, try and imagine the position of someone who's in a very, very religious society who will be ostracized if they don't wear it.
Yes,
like it's kind of like the left have completely they now have an idea of choice that's based on end stage capitalism insanity. It's like the choice to cut off your breasts, the choice to have an orchiectomy. These aren't choices. These are sometimes desperate things that people grab onto.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And also a terrible thing about it, and another reason why a lot of people are doing this, I think, is because a lot of people are having real trouble with money. I've said this before, but you notice a lot of people with crowdfunders, like Bristow, the Green Party person, had one up. That was supposedly for operations, legal costs. Most of these people aren't going to get operations, and the ones who are, I really think, are acting on they've been sold a pup. I think a lot of people don't realize that there's not going to be any sensation. Like someone told me that when you have a double mastectomy, you don't have any sensation here afterwards. So that's like another thing that's going to remove them from their bodies and remove them from closeness.
It's just desperately sad.
It
honestly.
It really is.
Artie, can I say what an objet d'art you have today?
It's
What
a
is
great
What is
hit.
going on behind you?
It's the
Big
greatest hit.
Artie. Big Artie.
All the things. I got the Muppet back there.
Like, I couldn't
the
decide.
Amphora.
They're all
Yeah.
going in.
Who
I
painted
got
it?
the
Who
goddess
painted
Athena.
it?
Oh, my friend painted it of me. Yeah.
Oh, it's lovely. It's a
Yeah.
very
It's
good
very
portrait.
sweet.
You can
Yeah,
even see it looks like you, which is what I like in a portrait.
Yeah, it's generally
You
a
know?
good
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
I'm with you on that, Graham.
call me an art snob, but
I don't know what to do with it though. I mean, I'm so happy that he painted me, but like, is it a bit gauche to put up a painting of yourself in your house?
Yeah.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Put it in the toilet. That's where you have to hang these things, isn't it?
Oh, I love it though. I don't know what to do with it, but
That's
I
what
do
people
love
tell
it.
me to do with my BAFTAs, but that's the room. But that's the room everyone will see, you know. So why would you put them there, you know? I think better thing is to just put them in drawers and stuff. So every so often you open them and you go, oh, I want a BAFTA.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Surprise! What's a BAFTA look like? Are they pretty?
I
Sorry,
wouldn't call
that's
them
a
pretty.
derail.
They're kind of like carved faces, like half a face, like the drama mask.
Oh, yeah.
And they've got an eye missing. And a funny thing happened, like basically they once gave me a writer's award, which they put on the same day as the craft awards because they don't like filming writers or admitting they had anything to do with the production. And they were so disinterested in it that they never sent me the plaque that you stick on the front that tells you what you won it for. And I've kind of forgotten. So I think it's for the IT crowd, but I can't remember. Listen, someone asked about the clip that was shared on YouTube of me a few days ago. And I believe it was me shouting, you're not a lesbian or something like that. I can't remember what it was. But yes, it was a very heavily cut down clip where I was saying that no lesbian is interested in a woman with a penis. And they cut it so it looked like I was saying no lesbian is interested in a woman. You see, that's
well, obviously. I mean, honestly, that is so apparent that even if you had said it because you'd misspoken, you're like, if that's the best case you've got,
yeah, that's just
then honestly,
but here's what was interesting.
You don't really have much confidence in your case.
But here's what was interesting to me about it. Here's what was interesting to me about it. They always have to do this type of thing because they cannot argue the case. They cannot argue the actual case because they know that saying that some lesbians have penises is indefensible homophobia.
That's right.
That's what it is. It's indefensible homophobia. So if they allowed people to see me saying that, everyone would agree with me.
And I don't think they knew they were signing up for this. When they started slipping into trans women or women, they were still picturing feminine gay men. And then they were like, well, I guess there's a couple who may be straight, you know? And then it was like, oh shit, they're all straight and they're all calling themselves lesbians.
Yeah. You know? So it was like typical dishonesty from them, you know? And also those protesters, we'll talk a little bit more about it in a sec, but those protesters, they were whistling, you know, screaming whistles all through. Like a disabled woman spoke, lesbians were speaking, a woman of color spoke. It was just, you know, like a bunch of middle class and I would say mostly straight people blowing whistles so you couldn't hear lesbians.
This is like,
you know,
they've whipped themselves into a frenzy, just like anti-abortion activists. You know, they can't think rationally anymore. They whip themselves into a self-righteous frenzy. Yeah.
Here's the most frightening thing, and it's a frightening thing that I think that people are going to have to face up to. And luckily, I think the LGB Alliance is on the way to facing up to it. The homophobia is now coming from some gay people.
Yeah.
You know, the major homophobic organization in the UK is Stonewall. Stonewall is an organization devoted to getting straight men into lesbian and gay spaces, or straight people into lesbian and gay spaces. I don't know if you saw the thing that was posted the other day. Hilarious thing. What's the guy's name? Let me see if I can find it. Alex something. It's so funny. He said, a student came up to me and told me how great it was to be lectured to by a visibly queer person, right? This is a straight guy who's married to a woman, right? But the woman identifies as a man, so he thinks he's a gay man.
And he's visibly queer, which means he's got an asymmetrical haircut, you know?
Exactly. I mean, it's like these people have been kind of given a kind of free pass into the kind of gay movement. And they're the last people who deserve to be there. They're straight. They're just straight people. They're straight people.
Tell me about it. It makes me
straight.
so angry because it really is about sex. Sexual orientation isn't a label. It's a thing that you do, you know? And it's a thing that you get profound guilt and shame as a child for being attracted to doing and for wanting to do. And then you get profound guilt and shame for doing it. And then you get attacked for doing it. And you lose, you know, the price I paid in the 90s when homophobia was really bad. I didn't get to go to high school. I was a fucking homeless street kid for a year in my young teens. For God's sake, these straight middle-class men saying, I'm just like you. Fuck you, you know?
And also using the word queer. Yeah. Throwing around the word queer.
Yeah.
I'm queer. Fuck you again. Like I noticed that not Laurie Penny, sorry, what's the other person who looks like a 12-year-old boy? Ellen Page. Ellen Page was at that thing, and she had a green carnation. And the green carnation was to celebrate a bit of quote unquote queer history. So that's Oscar Wilde is now a queer again because of straight people and troubled lesbians like Page coming into gay spaces. Like that's the thing. If you have to change the language to call gay people a slur, then maybe you shouldn't be in that group.
At least she is a lesbian, though, but she's not saying she's a lesbian anymore. But it really pisses me off when straight people call themselves queer. Because there was a little time in the 90s where there was a punk rock reclaiming the word queer kind of thing. Like Queer Nation was a very radical gay rights organization.
Oh, Johnny Best wrote very well about this.
You know? That's right. But that was a thing then. Now that straight people are adopting the word, and now that it's been watered down, it seems, utterly disgusting to be using it. You know, I'm still kind of like, I'm not as hostile to the word because I was very closely aligned with that kind of radical queer activism in the 90s.
Sure.
You know, but I totally sympathize with people like Dennis Kavanaugh, who's like, this word out of bounds, you know, and Fred Sargent's very outspoken. You know, he lived through the AIDS crisis. He lived through all the phases of gay rights, from the homophile movement to gay liberation, you know, and he's like, no.
You know, it's like the difference, I think, in the use of the word is that it used to be used to describe gay people.
That's right.
You know, and now it's used to describe gay people and straight people who have interesting haircuts. It's really just outrageous. Listen, our guests are here, so shall we bring them in? We can keep going a little bit afterwards and keep it up. Hello, Sarah, are you ready to go in? Give me a thumbs up if you are. You look like you're looking at stuff, so we can leave it for a few seconds if you like. I don't know. Sarah seems... Well, let's bring in Ali, first of all. Hello, Ali. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm fantastic. Thanks. Hi, three of you.
Grace,
lovely to see you again. Thank you for the warm welcome the other day. It was lovely to be a part of it.
There's always a welcome in the hillside.
That's
right. Absolutely.
How did you think it went? Were you happy with it?
I think all of us at Medicalization Cymru were really pleased with it, especially the turnout. I think it was just over 100, mainly women, arrived was absolutely fantastic. You know, as you saw, Graham, loads of those came on their own. They came from North Wales, the valleys. It was just absolutely incredible to see that support there.
Yeah. Joe Bartosh was there, who's been just doing great work about all this. And Mr. Menno did a fantastic number at the end. It was really great. The other thing about Mr. Menno I loved was how angry he was. He made a really powerful speech.
But really passionate as well. I mean, you said the tears when he was actually giving his talk. Were real. So.
Well, you know, I mean, it's like it's terrible to see people of his own community encouraging homophobia, you know, like there were so many lesbians who spoke, you know, and these arseholes who were behind us who were just whistling all through it. I mean, luckily that became just kind of wallpaper after a while. And it wasn't
I just blanked it out in the end. It was, you know, trying to sort of hone what everybody else was saying and just trying to ignore it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because again, it's not a counter argument. It's not a counterpoint. It's just, let's try and silence.
They wanted to drown us out. And what was really interesting is when, we had about 5-6 speakers, when they came up, if they said anything that was clearly the truth and they didn't want to hear, they would end up, blowing the whistles really loud. And I thought that was really interesting. So at some level, they were actually listening to what was being said.
Wow.
Interesting.
Maybe that would be. I mean, I remember one trans-identified guy came over and he seemed very nice and he was asking people for quotes. He was covering it for something, and he seemed fine. And I thought, wow, well, maybe I don't know, maybe they'll learn something, because I think they're arguing against a phantom. They don't really know what the arguments are. And they think that as someone pointed out, one woman had a sign that said, "I am not a vagina," or something like that.
No, I've written that down because I thought that was the first thing I saw, which really sort of shocked me. It said, "Woman does not equate to vagina."
Yeah.
And I wanted to go over and say to her, okay, firstly, what the hell are they teaching you in biology in school? That was my first initial thought. And then I was thinking, I've worked in the violence against women sector for 25 years. And I thought, you tell the thousands of women that are raped every year in this country that they weren't raped because they had a vagina. They weren't raped because because a man said, oh, that person thinks they're a woman. They were raped because they had the biology of a woman. Yeah. So for those young, because they were mainly under 18s, weren't they, in that group? And I thought, do they really believe all what they're saying? Because a woman is not a vagina, or clearly we're not just a vagina. Thank you very much.
But they think that's what we think. That's the crazy thing. Let me just quickly introduce Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Sarah, you're muted though. Just to warn you.
Hi,
Sarah. Thanks for joining us today.
Lovely to meet a fellow LGB Alliance alum. Hello.
Hi.
They seem to be like one of the people said. When they say woman is not a vagina, and yet they insist on calling women menstruators, cervix havers, all these things that reduce them to their body parts. I just don't. There's no consistency in their arguments. They're all over the place. Sarah,
I think it's a very specific slogan, isn't it? Because no one is actually saying if women is just a vagina, because that would be insane. Because nobody believes it, and they can't believe that we believe it. It's simply a way of it's a straw man, isn't it? It's a straw man. It's a way of not having to engage with what people are actually saying.
And there's
I'm glad that it was brought up because it's a really good one.
I think it's a bit more than that,
address.
Actually, because I think they keep saying to us, as lesbians and gay men, that we're genital fetishists. Of course, they say it to the lesbians and gay men, not quite so much to the straight men.
Yeah.
Some mysterious reason, and especially the big ones like you. But it's just like so. What it is about saying this whole line about you're obsessed with what's in people's pants and you're obsessed with genitals and all the rest of it. That's actually a way of erasing homosexuality.
Yeah,
that's right.
So it's incredibly important to them to say that, because it's another way of wiping out the reality of same-sex attraction as well as sex. And this in Wales, it says LGB on the front of the plan, and it's absolutely part of the same thing and the same absolute bollocks that we're all trying to deal with. But it's that's really important to them for that reason, I think. It's trying to send. I said it on the stage. I said it again. It's trying to push us back in the closet. It's trying to pretend that being lesbian or gay is a bad thing, and you should
is a matter of preference. It's the most conservative argument about gay people I've ever heard.
Yeah, but what it reminds me of is Helen made that extraordinary quote. She shared that extraordinary quote with us last week about how, what was that quote? Do you remember that, Helen? About when a generation doesn't have a movement to fight for anymore, they'll just turn around and fight against what the previous generation had fought for. That is haunting me because that's what's going on. Fighting for homosexual rights, fighting for no conversion therapy, fighting for saying that it's not a choice, turning around saying, actually, it is a choice. Actually, you should conversion yourself. Actually, you need to learn, train yourself. It's like they just flipped everything around and went the other way because they ran out of things to argue.
It's not like there is nothing to argue.
Yeah.
The world is going to hell in a handbasket. If you want something to have a fucking fight about, then fight about what is happening to women in Afghanistan. Fight about the fact the world is burning. There are a million better things to fight about than this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody mentioned that to one of them, and they said, "Why don't you think about Afghanistan?" And their reply was on Tuesday, "Well, what about the trans people in Afghanistan?" And I just,
did you see about
what trans people in Afghanistan? Do you think anyone is going to opt in to womanhood in Afghanistan? Are you crazy? Actually, there are some, but they're not doing well. But
the brave women of the football team who walked out of the country because they know that they are a target.
Oh, really?
And they put on their burqas and they walked over the border. That's bravery. Turning up with a few hoodies and masks to stand outside the Senedd when you have the whole of the establishment on your side, that's not bravery.
No, it really isn't, is it?
It's not a liberation struggle. I'm sorry, darlings. It just isn't.
Yeah. No, listen, I want to be sure that we haven't actually talked about why everyone was there and what the protest was about. I'm so sorry. It's basic housekeeping that I have to do. Ali, can you explain what Wednesday was about?
Wait, first of all, can you explain what Wales
Tuesday.
is?
Was it Wednesday or Tuesday? Tuesday.
So very,
to us Americans.
simply, in about 2 sentences, Wales has got an LGBTQ plus action plan that they've put out to consultation. So when it comes down to the core of what that action plan is, we've done a lot of research and we've gone through every single sort of sentence in it. It is basically missed out lesbian, gay, bisexual, and any kind of any sort of thing that women are involved with or that single-sex spaces would impact on women have literally been left out of the plan. So where we do not disagree with trans, whatever you want the alphabet soup to be involved in, of course that's got to be there, but not to the detriment of what's supposed to be the LGB part of that action plan as well. So where originally we were thinking about, well, how can we improve this action plan? We've now come to the point that we can't, and we literally just want them to bin it. So that's why we've called it Can a Plan, and literally start again. But more importantly, and Sarah will say, about listening to LGB and women's voices when they do a new one.
And I think that it needs to be put, I mean, just to answer Archie's question. So Wales is one of the 4 nations in the United Kingdom, and it has a level of devolved powers. At the moment, the Gender Recognition Act and the Equality Act are not devolved, but both the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Government have put it as something that they wish to achieve is devolution of those elements. So we are also in that kind of complex position that many people in Scotland are in about the relationship between devolution and nationalism and all this. Yeah. But I think that there are some specific issues for Wales. It's a Labour government. And so that distinction and opposition to Westminster is cited in a different way. And how you argue with that becomes a different problem. Mark Drakeford very clearly identifies as a socialist, despite the fact he seems to have completely lost sight of the material reality of the sexed body. It's like socialism just requires some connection to reality and its understanding of political power.
Yeah, material reality is kind of fundamental to socialism.
Yeah, so they've just closed a consultation on relationship and sex. Is it sexual education?
Sexuality. They change it from sex education to
sexuality. It's called RSE, and I always think of it as RSE. I just got halfway through that sentence and realised I'd forgotten this but which has exactly the same foundation. It's the same ideology. It's Stonewall bullshit, and the whole idea that sex doesn't matter and gender does matter, and the patriarchy somehow is not remotely relevant to anything that's happening, and that all lesbians, gays and bisexuals must support our trans siblings in every possible part of their demands. And so the fact that lesbian spaces in Wales are being dismantled practically daily, it sometimes feels like, and so on, it's just invisible and irrelevant, and suck my girl dick is all too common a phrase, and all the rest of it. So that agenda, that ideology is very strong here.
And that can perhaps be explained a little bit by the fact that the people who put the plan together, which was supposed to be a wide range of views, all come from places like Pride Cymru, Glitter Cymru, Stonewall.
Cymru.
Sorry guys. Pride, Glitter, Cymru. I don't think you're going to get anything good out of someone with glitter in their name, and it just seems that there's absolutely no view from people who believe that same-sex attraction exists. It's all
worse
people
than that.
who believe
We tried really hard to be involved. Both Merched Cymru and LGB Alliance Cymru wrote repeatedly to government ministers and were brushed off, or worse, you might say we were stonewalled.
Yeah. It's astonishing because we're seeing every day how important it is that there is at least one organization, just one, that speaks for same-sex attracted people alone. Because all the other alphabet soup organizations are just directing all their attention towards basically heterosexual cross-dressers with autogonophilia. So it's like there has to be just one organization that speaks for homosexual rights, for the LGB, and we get brutally attacked for just trying to be one organization. And we're seeing more and more how necessary it is, how sidelined homosexuals are becoming every day. It's just more and more important that there's one organization to speak for us. And I find it astonishing that people like Ulan go out of their way to call us a hate group, when all we're doing is advocating for the rights of gays and lesbians, in our respective countries.
Well, we were told that Stonewall, because they had reached out to different groups within their own research for this action plan, that was enough. But when we looked at the research, some of the research, I don't even think we could actually find, could we? Whether it didn't exist or it hasn't been published, we don't know. But, if you looked at what the research was, it was, again, literally all their own, Stonewall groups and Stonewall affiliated groups.
That's kind of how this whole thing has taken such a hold. Peter Boghossian and Helen Pluckrose and James Thingy, James Lindsay, they all found out that all of kind of queer studies and gender identity theory, all that sort of stuff, it's all people writing nonsense papers and citing other people who have written nonsense papers. So that kind of model of citing nonsense and having it look like it has some sort of foundation seems to be picking up in political circles as well.
Yeah, I think there's a real challenge as well that both the papers that get cited are incomprehensible gibberish. But the actual alleged research is poor. So you'll get self-selecting groups. Somebody will run something online and then they'll use that to say, well, we had 500 respondents and 50% of them thought this. But there's absolutely no structured piece of research that's going on around that. And that, I think, is really problematic, of course, as a base for policy. And that's only going to get worse when you're not asked your sex anymore. Agreed. Or you're only asked whether it aligns with what you had at birth or whatever.
No, because I read this action plan the other day and I was really shocked at how childish it is. It's written in a way that it doesn't say anything. It doesn't make anything clear. I look at point 12. It says, provide LGBTQ people with a greater understanding of their human rights, what they mean, how they intersect, or when they have been infringed, as well as how to seek redress when this happens. But there's nothing concrete there. It just talks about human rights. But what rights explicitly are we talking? Maybe that will come at a later date, but it's very, very worrying. The sort of the massive sort of overarching aims here that are it's built on sort of a house of sand.
Because one of our questions
data that they have
is what human rights do you want to talk about here? And only one person yet has had the honesty to say to us directly, well, we mean self-ID, we mean the right to be known as what you are. And when we say, well, actually there are problems and let's talk about the practical implementation of that. Can we have a lesbian only space? What happens if there's a gay male club night and you know, somebody demands that they've got the right to go in there or whatever. How's that supposed to work, guys? Oh, no, just being nasty. You're painting everybody as all these other things. And it's like, well, no, we just want to know how we protect our boundaries and have some dignity. Thank you.
Yeah, like self-ID, we already have self-ID. You can ID as whatever you want. You can say whatever you want about yourself already. Yeah. But what they're saying is enforcing by law that everybody has to agree with you. So it's not really self-ID. It's forcing everybody else to shut up and agree by law. And that's lunacy. When you put it that way, that doesn't sound very friendly at all, you know? It doesn't sound very trans-friendly, because that means transsexuals don't get to disagree. Transsexuals also can't keep predators out of their organizations anymore. You know?
Because what we've said to them is, you know, as Sarah just said, so what rights do you think you don't have already?
Yeah.
And there aren't any.
No.
It's kind of, I you know, when we're talking about it here and thinking back on those students the other day, who, by the way, made fun of one speaker because she was speaking Welsh, right? Yeah. So you're probably not, you're probably not even talking about people who are from Wales. But when I looked at them, I thought another thing that has happened, which is really unfortunate and really needs to be sorted out, is that teenagers who are going through the normal angst of being young and going through puberty and all that stuff now think that this is a political problem, what's happening to them. It's not a political problem, it's a personal problem. Everyone goes through it. But these middle-class kids suddenly have, you know, they have to go to bed early or whatever it happens to be, and that suddenly clicks inside them as an actual someone is taking away their human rights, right? Do you know what I mean? And you can see that as well. I saw like one tweet from someone who was talking about kid sexuality, you know, that, you know, something like you must let children do whatever they want in their home and stuff like this. And it's like they're trying to take normal safeguarding, the safeguarding that exists across society in families, you know, in you know, rape crisis centers and whatever it is, and just completely do away with it because kids want to kind of rebel and kids don't want to have these kinds of structures, you know?
It's horrible.
Really, sorry, I've kind of explained that in a very all over the way type
No,
way.
I think it's even worse because they're politicizing their own angst and their own rebellion. Yeah. But then they're sort of making it more real by medicalizing it. And that is sort of like, I think Ken Zucker was the pediatric trans doctor, one of the most famous experts in trans medicine in the world. And he kind of regrets having been on the puberty blocker train and prescribing puberty blockers to some people early on. But the way he put it was really interesting. He was like, they weren't going to listen. They wanted to make their angst real, and nothing makes it more real than like, look, I have a medical prescription and a surgery and doctors talking to me. And so we had to give them something. It was almost like a placebo. We had to give them puberty blockers in hopefully an effort to buy them some time to change their minds. Yeah. But we had to do something because they weren't going to listen to anything but real medicine. They had to make it concretize their angst, you know? So they're politicizing it, and then they're concretizing it by modifying their bodies and going to doctors and saying, look how professional and formal and serious my angst is. I've got medicine, you know, I've got a medical condition.
That's a good point.
That's very true.
I think that's a really good point. What I genuinely don't understand is how so many institutions and you know, people who presumably think they're good are buying into this shit. I genuinely don't understand that.
I have a slight theory on it. I think that a lot of very, very bad people, and bad for different reasons, let's say lazy politicians, greedy people, whoever it happens to be, a lot of people who say don't have, let's say, Kathleen Stock's smarts, you know, and are jealous of her, right? Like, all of these people realize that this is a way to climb up the ladder of the society's ladder without actually having any talent or any aptitude or any kind of, you know, compassion or any of the things that the people who do get ahead can achieve. You know,
I think immediately to Philosophy Tube and his "I feel free."
I think what's really interesting what you've just said there, then, with this action plan, the expert panel we've just discussed have actually written into the action plan that when this action plan is, you know, presented and it becomes law, they've written themselves a job role in there for life, because this action plan will need to be, looked at every 3 years. It'll need to be updated. It'll still need an expert panel on it. So, Graham, what you've just said is absolutely right. It's like they have now literally got a job for life, peddling this nonsense and getting paid for it.
Yeah, and as we know, it's such an inconsistent and incoherent doctrine that you can just advise on it forever. Because there's never any correct answer. So 1 second you're a bigot if you ask for pronouns, if you don't ask for pronouns. Another second you're a bigot if you do ask for pronouns. It changes with each person, and each person, and each reading of Judith Butler. Reading Judith Butler isn't going to clear anything up. So it's just such an amazing long con. And I'll tell you another way to look at it that I wish more people would, is that if you really want to know how radical this concept is, this thing we're fighting, ask yourself why the right aren't fighting it that hard. The right are not really
quite the opposite.
Yeah, because this is an own goal for the left. When your enemies are shooting themselves, don't get in the way. Well, I don't know how the saying goes. It's something like that.
When the enemies are making a mistake, don't interrupt them. I think that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
something like that. It's Sun Tzu, I believe, in The Art of War. Another. Oh, sorry, I thought that was a rule.
It's interesting to note what you've just said then, that the only MS, which is the member of the Senedd, that came out to witness the rally and to discuss anything was one member of the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
Nobody else showed up.
Yeah. I mean, there is one thing that is going to happen, I think, not too far from the future, is, whatever party it happens to be, in a way may well be the Conservatives in the UK are just going to hoover up all these women who've been left disenfranchised by the political parties, and why wouldn't you go with them? They're the only party who's not going to erase women. It's crazy. So all they're doing is they're watching left-wing people, like I would imagine most of us here, I think I can say that we're all left-wing, fight amongst themselves over a load of shite. And it's such a shame, and I really thank you guys for standing up to it. I wish you didn't have to do it. Can I ask, just before we finish up with Sarah and Ali, what can we do now moving forward? What can people do to help Wales, to keep an eye on Wales, and to keep an eye on what's going on there?
Well, I think, and Ali may well have stuff to add. I think the first thing is that for people in Wales, contacting all 5 of their members of the Senedd, and to be saying to them, this is nonsense. I think that the consultation closes on the 22nd, and through Merched Cymru we will be publishing guidance to possible responses and all the rest of it. But if anyone can just by the 22nd go in and answer question 1 to say this is a load of steaming unicorn poo and it's don't do this, that's good. If you can do more, that's fab. But and I think talking to your friends and family, exploring this, having those conversations with your children, with your colleagues, and so on, to say you do realise this matters. No, I'm not putting pronouns in my bio, and I'm not going to do this, that, and the other, and all the rest of it. And so, because I think that most people know that this is highly problematic, but they want to be kind, they want to be nice.
Yes.
So we need to be getting the conversations out there which say, you can be a lovely human being, but you need to put the line in the sand somewhere. Yeah. And here is where you need to draw it. So it is about enabling that public conversation as much as possible. But it's the members of the Senedd who make the decisions. So they're the ones who are the first people to get at. I don't know whether Ali would add stuff to that.
Yeah, and the only other thing really is we've actually got a webinar on October the 2nd, which is called Sex, Sexuality and Reality. So again, it's discussing all the issues that we've just mentioned today. That's on Eventbrite, so please sign up to that, and hopefully, we'll have a really large sort of discussion around people who don't necessarily have the same ideas around it as we do, again, which will make it better for us, because we want everybody's, input into our discussions. But so that's a good way of, if you haven't heard these sort of discussions before in Wales anyway, come to that webinar and just hear some of the areas that we're going to be talking about.
And follow LGB Alliance Cymru and Merched
Merched Cymru.
Yes.
Will you send those links to Jen, who set this up, and she can put them in the thing below. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you coming along, and thanks again for a lovely time on Tuesday. It was really great. Brilliant. It was lovely to be there.
Thank you.
I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Oh, and your thing was read out. Oh, what did I do? I removed wrong. Oh, there. And they read out your statement, Helen, which was great as well.
I know, and thank you for sending me the video. That was very sweet. Honestly, the lady that read it out did a far better job than I would have been able to do. I think my talking is way too quick.
Oh yes,
but it's amazing. They found somebody with a Welsh accent to read it. That was great.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't attempt it.
I am amazed. Wow, these Welsh women are even more badass than Scottish women, and I never knew anyone could be more badass than Scottish.
Not more.
I would say
as badass. As
really badass. People were kind of making fun of the fact that there were only 100 or 150 people there, however many there were. But I think one of the big differences is that a Welsh woman hasn't been arrested and is being threatened with jail for standing up for her rights. So there's a slight there's a bit more focus on Scotland than there is on Wales. But I do hope that anyone who saw the footage from the thing and wants to drown out the the straight activists who are behind us will do so and come along to the next one. I don't want to finish up. I feel like there's more to talk about. It's such a crazy week. Is there anything else that we can kind of quickly cover before we go away, or should I?
An election coming up in Canada.
How's that looking? I heard he was in trouble and then he bounced back. And
I haven't been following the polls too much, but it's really frustrating that basically all the parties are terrible on this, except for this one party called the People's Party of Canada, which is this brand new kind of fringe party that's like ultra libertarian, anti-climate change, kind of draws a lot of the fringe anti-vax kind of stuff. But they're like paying attention to this issue and speaking out about it because they're grabbing at anything, right? So a lot of people, we were talking earlier about how the conservatives are hoovering up disillusioned women, you were saying. Well, in Canada, it's like the far right libertarian sort of kind of fringe kind of party. I'm hoping that some of the major figures in the GC movement, some of the major political figures, I think there's room for another party, I think there's room for a left-wing party because every left-wing party has betrayed women. The Greens have done it, Labour has done it, who else? Lib Dems have done it. I think there's actually room for a kind of cross-partisan a phrase, or non-partisan connection between people, and I just think that there would be a bunch of people you could kind of grab with this,
but it's possible that if somebody actively campaigns, say for Labour, say somebody like Duffield, she says, look, I'm campaigning on this, and they see how many votes that she can get from that. It'd be interesting to see if people start to wake up.
Absolutely, but here's my thing, right? I feel the same way I did about people who voted for the Iraq War. There's certain people who I don't think should be anywhere near power because of how they've handled this. Amelia Womack is one example. If you go on a TV channel and you cannot say what a woman is, you should never have any power. You should never be placed in a position of power because it just proves that you're so weak that you can be bent this way and that depending on what you think is popular.
But they've all done that. Pretty much, they've all done that right now. It's incredible.
That's why I think we need another party. Might be a useful idea. I don't know how can parties start. Can I start one? Will I start one down the pub?
I think you can. I think you can. But there may be some opposition.
So let me think. Is that was there anything else that we wanted to cover? I'm kind of now ruining it by ending it on a flat note, and I don't actually have much more that I want to say, I guess. Except I think that's fine. I think Merched Cymru there were fab, and it was really nice to hear from them. And I also wanted to say that I think rallies like this are really important because despite the fact that they may have only been 100 or 150 women, people walking past
will take note, will think, well, what's going on here? And then they will be told they can, they can sort of discuss the issues. And that's how you get people involved, isn't it? Like, that's how you make people notice.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, here's my thing about a party, right? If you were to take some of the things that we try and do with, when we're trying to peak trans people, which is explain the issues, explain the science, explain what's going on, talk about the danger to women in shelters, talk about the danger to lesbians, and so on. Now, that's always difficult. It's hard to bring up. It's hard to talk about. It's hard to get people to listen. Imagine if it was a political campaign. Imagine if it was tied to a political campaign. You're going from door to every single person you speak to in real life about this. They just go, boom, yes, totally with you. Can't believe that's happening. This is crazy. This is terrible. We must stop it. But online, you would think that it was the law of the land, But if we were able to get out doorstep, I don't know. I think there might be something there.
Maybe. Oh, I should just mention really quickly, because I never mentioned Canada stuff enough, but somebody was mentioning in the comments that there's a rally all around Canada for men and women to defend single-sex prisons. I didn't actually know that, but now that I know that, I'm happy to highlight it. Look
around
that up,
Canada.
folks.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
In 6 cities, which is great.
I've
Heather Mason, and there was a lot of organizing in Canada around men and women's prisons because there are so few. I mean, Canada's a not very populous country, and there are not very many women in Canadian prisons. So the impact is just like people are really gathering around this because the number of men being put in women's prisons is really disrupting women. Yes. And Heather Mason is doing such a good job organizing, really bringing people together around this.
Yeah.
She's
that's great.
She's a powerhouse. She's great.
What was I going to say about that? I've noticed there's a good few new groups starting up. There's also another group being started up by the guy who's with LGB USA, who's Curtis, is it? And he's
Curtis, something.
I met a friend of his at the Wales thing, and they're really going on the offensive with the boxer ceiling and the cotton ceiling, and the fact that kids, young women are grooming each other to break those gay boundaries. So that will be a good thing as well. It seems to Curtis Tripp, that's it. So it seems to me there's a lot of different publicized. Oh yeah, LGB Alliance Conference. Yes, that's coming up soon in October. So
October,
yeah, so I'll definitely be checking that out.
That was gonna be fun.
So we'll have all the links as usual. Thanks to our brilliant person behind the scenes, Jen. And,
big shout out to Jen. If you see the Mess We're In podcast in the comments, that's the fourth member of our quartet, Jen.
Yes,
it's wonderful.
Who does a fantastic job.
She does a fantastic job, and also what I really love about all our YouTube episodes is that they now have all the links below, so it's a real resource for people.
Yeah, if you watch these videos, come back and watch them a few hours later, and we've got tons and tons of links that Jen's put together that are really, really interesting resources.
Yes, please do. Right, I guess that's it. Maybe we'll do another weekend if we feel like it, but otherwise I will see you next week at around the same time. And I think if we're doing them Wednesdays, it'll probably always start at 4:30 from now on. So yeah, it has to kind of, because I have to do some daddy stuff. All right, guys, lovely to talk to you. I will see you next time.
See you later. Bye.